The Bat Family is a network of like-minded crime fighters who operate in and around Gotham, with Batman as its head. First appearing in Detective Comics number 27 in May of 1939, Batman, as most of you know, has been a key player in the DC universe pretty much since it began. When Batman first showed up, he was caped crusading all by his lonesome. No parents, no butler, no nothing. Bob Kane and Bill Finger, the Batman creators, alongside Jerry Robinson, decided that Batman needed someone else, and so they created the very first member of what would become the Bat Family in the form of Richard Dick Grayson as Robin the Boy Wonder. Robin first appeared in Detective Comics Volume 1 number 38 in April of 1940 when his birth family, the Flying Graysons, were accidentally killed and Bruce Wayne took in the young lad and trained him on how to fight crime. Batman and Robin operated as a solid two-player team for a long while. Now back in those early Golden Age days, Batman actually became an honorary member of the GCPD, and with that, Commissioner James Gordon, who also first appeared at the same time as Batman in Detective Comics number 27, became part of the Batman family. Now you can kind of count him, you can kind of not. It really depends on the era that we're talking about. But not too long after these three were operating as a well-oiled unit, we were introduced to another pivotal figure of the Batman family. Quite possibly the sticky glue that holds these traumatized and broken crime fighters together. Alfred Pennyworth, Alfred Beagle, or simply Alfred the Butler was introduced in Batman number 16 in May of 1943, acting as the #1 supporting member of the team, or group, or whatever you want to call them. Now, following this period of time, we start to shift towards the Silver Age of comics, and that's when, thanks to public pressures and scrutiny at the time, Batman, Robin, and the Bat Family were given 4 more allies in the form of a dog, Ace the Bat Hound, appearing in Batman Volume 1 number 92 in June 1955, a Batman-worshipping magical 5th dimensional imp called Batmite, who appeared in Detective Comics Volume 1 number 267 in May of 1959, and the dynamic duo were given female love interests in the form of Catherine Kathy Kane, Batwoman, first appearing in Detective Comics number 233 in July 1956, and Betty Kane, Kathy's niece, and the first ever Batgirl, appearing in Batman number 139 in April 1961. Now, these additions to the Bat Family didn't last incredibly long, as editor Julius Schwartz took over control of the Batman comics in 1964 and got rid of Batwoman, who was seemingly de-lifed, Batgirl, who retired, Ace, who also retired, and Batmite, who was expelled from this dimension, as he thought the characters were too silly, especially for the new stories he wanted for the Batman character. So instead, Schwartz worked alongside the 1996 Batman TV show producer, William Dozier, in order to introduce a new female character. Barbara Gordon, who first appeared in August 1951, was introduced as the new Batgirl in Detective Comics Volume 1, issue 359 in January of 1967. As the daughter of Police Commissioner Gordon, it improved upon the previous Batgirl and Batwoman and let Barb kind of stand as her own character, not simply as a love interest, which is usually a good thing. And that kind of makes up the Silver Age. The current Bat Family members all started to make moves in their own ways throughout the Bronze Age. Other characters like the villain Catwoman, or Selina Kyle on Earth 2, the Golden Age character's Earth, became a solid romantic interest for Batman, joining the Bat Family alongside their daughter, Helena Wayne, who would go on to become Huntress. But again, this would be on Earth 2 and therefore doesn't really count for what we're talking about. Now, Richard Grayson, who was Robin at the time, started to become a very important member of the Teen Titans, but that caused DC some problems as the Batman and Robin dynamic was also starting to become popular again. In order for the two things to be able to happen and work simultaneously, early on in the 80s, Dick Grayson became the leader of the Teen Titans and took on the name of Nightwing, and the new Robin was introduced in the form of Jason J. Todd in Batman number 357 in March 1983. Jason was the son of another acrobatic circus family inspired by the Flying Graysons. Can you guess what their name was? Yes, that's right, it's the Flying Todds. Ooh! The Todds passed away at the hands of Killer Croc, leaving little Jason to be taken under the wing of Batman and join the Bat Family. Now, the issue of the two Robins' extremely similar backstories left Jason being a little overlooked, but luckily for him, and for any other continuity or character issues that DC was dealing with at the time, the Crisis on Infinite Earths event had arrived in April 1985. Luckily, the family family still remained largely the same after this event. Jason's story was worked to be a bit better, and both Alfred and Commissioner Gordon became more frequent supporting cast members. Batgirl Barbara Gordon seemed to kind of fall to the wayside though, as writers couldn't really figure out what to do with her. It is in the late 80s that Batman stories really hit a turning point, with both Batman the Killing Joke in July 1988 and Batman A Death in the Family starting in December of 1988, where the Joker crippled Barbara Gordon and took the life of Jason Todd, respectively. From this point, the family surprisingly seemed to actually grow more, with Tim Drake being introduced as the new Robin after he deduces the true identities of Batman and Robin, which took place in the Batman A Lonely Place of Dying storyline from Batman number 440 to 442 in October to December of 1989. And Barbara became an information broker and Batman's girl in the chair as Oracle, fully revealed in Suicide Squad Volume 1 number 38 in February 1990. The next addition to the Bat family would be introduced in Batman's Sword of Azrael number 1 in 1992, where we meet John Paul Valley, otherwise known as, you guessed it, Azrael, who becomes Batman's apprentice and even takes over his role in the 3-part Batman Nightfall crossover event starting in Batman number 492 in May of 1993 that sees the Venom-enhanced Bane break Bruce Wayne's spine. Azrael really stirred things up as Batman. He was much more violent and unethical than Bruce is, and as such caused the Bat family to kind of break apart temporarily. Tim Drake went off alone, Jim Gordon stopped working with the Bat, and Bruce stopped being interested in recovering from his injuries, forcing Alfred to walk away from his position. But Bruce obviously recovered and took the Batman mantle away from John Paul and temporarily gave it to Dick Grayson during Batman Prodigal from November 1994 to January of 1995. Everyone went back to their original places and Azrael came back and would team up with Batman from time to time. 2 more members to the Bat family became introduced around this time as well. Helena Bartonelli, the daughter of a crime boss, eventually became the new Huntress in the post-Crisis mainstream universe, first appearing in Huntress number 1 in April of 1989. There was also Stephanie Brown, who was a friend of Tim Drake and daughter of the supervillain Cluemaster, who started off her vigilante career as Spoiler, appearing in Detective Comics Volume 1, number 647 in August of 1992. Gotham was struck by an earthquake and became a no man's land for criminals to run amok in Detective Comics number 719 in March 1998. And with that, the Bat family sprung into action. Helena took on the role of Batgirl to strike fear into criminals, but it resulted in a confrontation with Batman that Helena failed, so Batman instead handed the Batgirl costume and title over to a friend of Oracle who proved helpful in the start of the No Man's Land event. That would be Cassandra Cain. Cassandra is the daughter of assassins David Cain and Lady Shiva, and was bred to become the perfect killer, and she is actually one of the greatest martial artists in the world, even rivaling Batman. Alongside this new Batgirl, Batman called on all members of the current Bat family. That's Dick Grayson as Nightwing, Tim Drake Robin, Barbara Gordon as Oracle, Azrael, and even Selina Kyle Catwoman, alongside the Bat family supporters of Commissioner Gordon, Alfred Pennyworth, and Gotham City physician Leslie Tompkins. Together they all successfully wrestled back control of Gotham City, so yay! That's good. After this point though, the team remained unchanged until the death of Azrael, which was really a turning point for the family. Batman distanced himself away from the team and started working with Sacha Bordeaux, Bruce Wayne's personal security and eventually Batman's crime-fighting partner, introduced in Detective Comics number 751 in December of 2000. The two are framed for the death of Vesper Fairchild though and go to prison, where Bruce escapes and Sacha gets blackmailed into becoming part of the secret organization called Checkmate. Now after this, a gang war breaks out in Gotham and Batman gets help from former League of Assassins assassin Onyx Adams, who helps out, becoming another member of the Bat family in 2004. This is also when Stephanie Brown rose to and fell from the Robin mantle and was seemingly killed. But not really. This led directly to Batman number 635 in February of 2005, otherwise known as the start of Batman Under the Hood, which saw the shocking return of an actually not dead Jason Todd as the extremely violent Red Hood, who joins the Bat family after causing them a whole hell of a lot of grief. From this point, we don't see any new additions to the Bat-themed family until Batman number 655 in September 2006, and the beginning of the Batman Batman and Son storyline, which introduces Damian Wayne as the son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul. So yes, the addition of a surprise son left things a little tense in the Bat family, and when Batman was quote-unquote killed and sent to battle through time by Darkseid in 2008 to 2009's Final Crisis, it left a vacuum that became a battle royale across Gotham in the storyline Batman Battle for the Cowl. Some of the Bat family struggled to find the missing Batman, while others fought to take over the mantle. A final battle between Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, and Tim Drake ended up with a victory for Dick Grayson, who became Batman once again, promoting Damian Wayne to the mantle of Robin and forcing Tim Drake to become Red Robin. It's around this time we get an all-new Batwoman in 52 #7 in August of 2006. Now while the Silver Age Batwoman was Kathy Kane, the new Batwoman mantle is taken up by the army brat Kate Kane, who is a lesbian expelled from West Point due to her sexuality. Now she is Bruce Wayne's cousin through her father Jacob Kane, who is Martha Wayne's brother. It is after this that Stephanie Brown is indeed still alive, and she steps into the new position of Batgirl from Cassandra Cain, who went on to become Black Bat and haunts my nightmares. In Batman and Robin #16 in January of 2011, Bruce finally realizes that despite all of his lone work and brooding, he was never actually alone. So he decides to expand, and as Bruce Wayne, he reveals that Bruce was the beneficiary behind Batman's technology, and then Batman's reach would go worldwide as Batman Incorporated. But then we got the New 52 in September 2011, and it all didn't matter anymore. Essentially, New 52 for Batman sets him back to being an undercover urban legend, only being publicly active for 5 years. He has an alliance to Jim Gordon, but the GCPD are still hostile towards him. Dick Grayson still operates as Nightwing and was the original Robin, but never took on the Batman role. Barbara Gordon is Batgirl again, no longer wheelchair bound. Tim Drake is Red Robin and founding member of the Teen Titans. Jason Todd is still Red Hood and he leads his own team called the Outlaws, and Damian Wayne is Robin. But now to make things more confusing, in DC Rebirth in 2016 and DC Infinite Frontier in 2021, a lot of history is reworked back into continuity. So to clean things up for the Bat family, during Bane's takeover of Gotham City, he snapped Alfred Pennyworth's neck in front of Damian Wayne. It broke the Robin and he went rogue, leaving and eventually returning again as Robin. But while Damian was gone, Tim Drake took on the Robin role yet again. Barbara, who became Batgirl, stepped down to become Oracle again as the physical strain was too much on her spine. Stephanie Brown and Cassandra Cain stayed as Spoiler and Orphan respectively, but they were collectively known as Batgirls, which is confusing. And Kate Kane stayed as Batwoman. A new hero, the metahuman Duke Thomas, became the Signal and came into the Bat family starting as the leader of the 2015 We Are Robin gang. John Paul Valley stayed as Azrael, Helena Bartonelli became Huntress once again, and what may be a surprise to some of you, Harley Quinn also joined the Bat family, making amends from her time as a villain and under the very watchful eye of Batman.
The House of El. This family tree is pretty extensive, so we're just going to stick with Earth 1 for this section. Although very little is known about them, Superman's most distant ancestors on the planet Krypton were Feln, his son Rugad, and his son Tomnu. No information is available on these ancestors, but Tomnu's son Arok is the first ancestor of note. Arok the Magnificent was a warlord who brought civilization to the planet Krypton with the help of a potion of strength. His magnificent strength caused enemy soldiers to pledge fealty to him as they believed he was a god. In his final military campaign against the warlord Uved, he kidnapped Uved's daughter Milia in hopes of forcing a peaceful surrender. Milia fell in love with Arok, and the two were married and named Bethgar and Bithgar of Eurica. A quick explanation of that. A Bethgar and a Bithgar are the equivalent to a governor and a governess, and Eurica was a large continent on the planet Krypton. They had a child who they named Kal, which is Kryptonian for child, and the family adopted the surname El, which means of the star. Kal-El I grew up to be the second Bethgar of Eurica. The Els ruled for over 20 generations, being mostly benign rulers with a few tyrants thrown into the mix to keep people on their toes. The next El whose name we know was Wabel, a tyrannic Bethgar. Wabel had two sons, Vad-El and Hyrel. Vard-El became the next tyrannical Bethgar, and after a quarrel between the two brothers, Hyrel was forced to flee his homeland. He had two sons, Japhel and Tioel. Japhel was a prophet for the god Roa, who predicted a great flood that would smite all the wicked Kryptonians while sparing the righteous, making him Noah in space! When the flood came, Tio, who by the way was a zoologist, called down winged beasts to save the people. Japhel, Tioel, and the survivors then set upon rebuilding their society, but not before Japhel made another prophecy predicting Krypton's eventual doom. Tioel had descendants such as Zor-el, who was the friend of an inventor, Kilgore. Kilgore invented several important things on Krypton, such as the compass and the hourglass, the latter of which he invented so that the Kryptonians could keep track of the tides in order to dive off of cliffs into the water to harvest an algae called silten, before the Drotho, a bunch of giant birds, could beat them to the edible plant life. When no one else had faith in the old man's invention, Zor-el tested the hourglass by diving off the cliffs, proving that they had kept accurate time. Zor-el soon married Kilgore's daughter, Wedna, and they had two children, Tro-el and Val-el. Val-el was a great explorer who set out across the Dandahu Ocean and discovered Vathlo Island. His troubled brother was a member of his crew who eventually led a mutiny against Val-el. When this failed, Tro-el and his men were left on an uncharted island which became Bokos, the Island of Thieves. One of Val-el's descendants was an astronomer named zor-el, who invented the telescope just in time to discover a starship coming towards Krypton. Krypton's first encounter with alien life resulted in the planet being enslaved by a race called the Vrangs. His son, Hatuel, led the slave revolt against the aliens and went on to invent the electric motor and the electromagnet. Hatuel's descendants included an inventor named Wirel, who invented Krypton's first audio recording equipment, and a scientist named Shuel, who was a respected mathematician and computer theorist. He had a daughter named Fedra Shuel, a legislator, and a son named Thar-el, who reformed Krypton's criminal justice system. His son, Plen-el, was a respected novelist whose son Nox-el was Krypton's greatest musical theater star. After this brief generational stop in showbiz, Nox-el's son Phil-el became a gifted surgeon who pioneered several Kryptonian medical techniques. His son Sorn-el was an agriculturist who helped end world hunger on his planet. His son Im-el was an atomic scientist who revolutionized Krypton's industry standards. He had two sons, Pyrel and Uel. Uel was an influential priest, and Pyrel was the commander of the Kandor Kryptonopolis forces during the planet's last war, which he ended by developing a chemical weapon that made the opposing army become passive and interested in pursuing peace. His son, Tala-el, was one of the founding members of the Kryptonian Science Council, which united all of the separate nations of Krypton under one government, and he actually wrote the planet's constitution. His sons, Pim-el and Gam-el, were a detective and an architect who teamed up to stop a plot to sabotage the rebuilding of Krypton's capital city, Kryptonopolis. Gam-el had a son, Var-el, who figured out interstellar travel without the use of a spaceship and journeyed to Earth, where he was stranded and eventually died. This inspired his son, a scientist named Jor-el I, to develop an experimental hyperspace rocket and go to Earth to study the planet, taking extensive notes. Jor-el I had 3 children with his wife, Nimda Andor, 2 of whom are very important to the Superman mythos. Getting the less important sibling out of the way, we have Nim-el, who was a weapons manufacturer. He was present in the city of Kandor when it was shrunk and put in a bottle by the villain Brainiac. He and his wife, Dondra Clutan's son Don-el, became the police chief of the Bottle City until they were freed by Superman. He went on to create a new Kandor city on an outer dimensional world called Roken. Another of Jor-el I's sons was Zor-el, another scientist. When his brother discovered Krypton's impending doom, he tried to build a rocket for himself, but ran out of time. When Krypton was destroyed, Zor-el's home, Argo City, was left intact and hurtled through space with its inhabitants. He married a woman named Allura Inzi, but they soon discovered that Argo City was turning into kryptonite. Zor-el managed to delay the city's demise by covering the planet in a lead shield. This shielding held for many years until a meteor shower caused its destruction, resulting in kryptonite radiation flooding the city. In order to save the life of his teenage daughter, Kara Zor-el, Zor-el placed Kara in a spaceship and sent it to Earth. Once the rocket was away, he managed to save several Kryptonian lives by transporting them into a dimension similar to the Phantom Zone, which he called the Survival Zone. They were trapped there for many years before eventually being rescued by Supergirl. Zor-el and his wife then joined the Kandorians on Roken. Their daughter, Kara Zor-el, is of course Supergirl. When she came to Earth, Superman agreed to train her to be a superhero, but weirdly made her live in an orphanage instead of letting her stay on his couch or in the Fortress of Solitude. She was eventually adopted by Fred and Edna Danvers, a rocket scientist and his wife, who had lost their son Jan and were hoping to adopt a child to help with their loneliness. Supergirl became a powerful hero in her own right before eventually dying in a fight with the Anti-Monitor in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and being erased from existence in the ensuing reboot of universes. She was later brought back to existence in the New Earth continuity with a slightly different origin, where she was Lana Lang's foster niece. Okay, so backtracking a bit, the third son of Jor-el I was Jor-el II. Jor-el was a gifted scientist who discovered the Phantom Zone and created the Phantom Zone projector, a device used to banish Krypton's criminals to the interdimensional realm. This secured Jor-el a spot on the Science Council. Due to an accident where a missile test had gone wrong and destroyed the colony on one of Krypton's moons, the Science Council banned all forms of space travel. Believing that Krypton's doom was approaching, Jor-el continued to develop experimental spacecraft in secret, hoping to evacuate the planet. When Krypton's destruction began, Jor-el realized he had run out of time. He and his wife, Lara Lor Van, the daughter of another Kryptonian scientist named Lor Van, decided to place their infant son Kal-El in one of the experimental rockets, and using the information collected by Var-El and Jor-el I, sent Kal to Earth, where he would not only survive, but thrive. They launched the rocket shortly before the planet exploded, killing them and everyone else on Krypton. Kal-El's rocket got to Earth, where it landed in Smallville, Kansas. He was found and adopted by the Kents, which leads us to the Kent family tree. The Kent family tree can be traced back to 6th century England, where a feudal lord named Sir Edmund Kent was killed in a jousting tournament by the evil Sir Oswald Bane. His son, Brian, inherited his lands and trained under a knight named Sir Grot, who trained him to be a fierce and cunning warrior. Fearing that Sir Bane would consider him a threat if he knew how skilled Kent was, he pretended to be meek and unskilled. One day, while in the Forest Perilous, he discovered a silver suit of armor, as well as a sword, shield, and a helmet which could conceal his identity. He donned the armor and became known as the Silent Knight, a heroic knight who never spoke and fought Sir Bane's forces. He had many adventures, sometimes working with King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, before eventually retiring and marrying Lady Celia Penbrook. The next known member of the Kent family tree is an American print shop owner from the 1800s named Silas Kent. He had two brothers, Ethan and William, but they're not really notable. Silas and his wife Abigail had 8 children: Belinda, Emma Lou, Jeb, Joel William, Jonathan, Lucy, and Owen. Silas was originally from Boston, but moved with his family to Lawrence, Kansas. Silas was a staunch abolitionist, which put him on the bad side of many of the locals, including a man named Luther Reed, with whom he got into frequent fights. Luther tried to run Silas and his family out of town, but Silas stood firm. When Silas discovered that pro-slavery legislators had rigged a territorial election, Silas used his printing press to print the entire Declaration of Independence on the front page of the town's newspaper. That night, Silas was shot by persons unknown, although many suspected Luther Reed to be the guilty party. Silas's son Jeb accused Luther of murdering his father and vowed revenge. This threat was pretext enough for the corrupt local sheriff to arrest Jeb with the intention of hanging him. He was rescued by his brother Nate. Jeb had a child named Taylor with a woman named Lily Beaumont, but he eventually joined up with the Jesse James gang. His brother Nate was eventually forced to bring him to justice, which resulted in a gunfight where Jeb and his gang were all killed. Nate married a woman named Mary and had children, which eventually led to the birth of their descendant, Sam Kent. Very little is known about Sam Kent, but in Superman Birthright number 3, Martha Kent describes him as a spiteful, needy man who worked hard to make his son feel stupid and insecure. Although in this book he is referred to as Matthew Kent, so we'll have to pardon the continuity gaffe. In my opinion, Mark Waid is the best comic book writer of his generation, so I'll give him a pass. This time. Anyways, Sam had two sons named Harry and Jonathan, with a wife whose name we don't know. Harry was married to a woman named Sarah, but he died in an accident on the Kent farm when he fell under a thresher. Jonathan and his wife Martha were the couple that found the rocket that Kal-El came to Earth in, and they became his adoptive parents. Hey, Batman's mom is named Martha too! What a random coincidence that I hope is never an important plot point in a movie. Anyways, Jonathan and Martha named the baby Clark Kent, and they were instrumental in teaching him right from wrong, as well as helping him deal with his developing powers. Clark Kent, of course, grew up to be Superman, the Man of Steel. He had a few different love interests over the years, such as Lana Lang, but he eventually married his fellow reporter at the Daily Planet, Lois Lane, which brings us to the Lane family tree. This DC Comics family tree is mercifully much easier to keep track of, although there is some variation depending on which continuity you're working off of. In the Earth 1 continuity, Sam Lane and his wife Ella are the owners of a horse farm in Pittsdale, Iowa. In the New Earth continuity, Sam Lane is a general in the United States Army who had two daughters with his wife Ella. He had wanted sons and as a result was cold and distant, forcing his children to do extensive combat training and apparently treating them more like soldiers than his children. He was an enemy of Superman, believing that it was only a matter of time before Superman would turn on humanity. He faked his own death, appearing to sacrifice himself to defeat the villain Imperiex, but was later revealed to be alive and working with Lex Luthor in a secret government facility that is overseeing the actions of the villain Brainiac. After he used the villain Reactron to kill the recently freed Kandorians in the new Krypton story, his daughter Lois called him a monster, and the files proving his involvement were leaked online by Jimmy Olsen. He then took his own life to avoid the shame of being arrested and taken before an international court. In the Earth 2 continuity, his daughter Lucy is married to a man named George Tompkins and has a daughter named Susie, who is a precocious child who tends to make her Aunt Lois's life as difficult as possible. In the Earth 1 continuity, Lucy Lane is a flight attendant who is the on-again, off-again girlfriend of Jimmy Olsen. In the New Earth continuity, she was still a flight attendant until she was blinded in a hijacking. She became depressed and tried to jump off a roof, but was rescued by Bizarro. Bizarro had a weird powder coating his body, which somehow restored Lucy's sight. Like her Earth 1 counterpart, she dated Jimmy Olsen for a while, but eventually broke up with him and started dating another Daily Planet reporter named Ron Troop. Lucy became pregnant and married Ron, eventually giving birth to a son named Sam Troop. After Sam Lane faked his death, she joined the military and eventually was brought into Sam's inner circle in an attempt to deal with the new Kryptonians from Kandor. Sam outfitted Lucy with a mystical suit, which granted her powers, making her Superwoman. Posing as a Kryptonian, she infiltrated the Kryptonians, killing several of them. She was defeated by Supergirl and taken into custody, whereupon Lois disowned her as family. Which brings us to Lois. The older daughter of Sam and Ella, Lois Lane had no greater desire than to be a journalist. In the Earth 1 continuity, when Lois was in high school, she entered a contest being held by the Daily Planet, where whoever submitted the best news report would be awarded a job at the planet once they came of age. She found herself in competition with a young Clark Kent, and the two uncovered an evil scheme by a villain named Paul Corey. Lois submitted her report and won the competition. After graduating high school and minoring in journalism at Raleigh College, Lois was hired by the planet and became one of its best reporters. In the New Earth continuity, she visited the Daily Planet when she was 15, lied about her age, claiming to be 19, and asked Perry White for a job. Lucy spoiled her ruse, but Lois was undeterred, breaking into LexCorp to try and find a scoop good enough to warrant being given a job at the prestigious paper. Luthor caught her and had her searched, but she managed to hide an important paper in her mouth, gave it to Perry White, and was given the job. She and Clark Kent eventually got together, and he trusted her enough to marry her and reveal his secret Superman identity to her. The two were married for years, and briefly adopted General Zod's son Lor-Zod, who they named Christopher Kent, but this was cut short when Chris was pulled into the Phantom Zone while helping Superman to defeat the General and his forces. Lois and Clark eventually had a biological child who they named John. At the age of 10, John began fighting crime with his father as the new Superboy. John became best friends with Damian Wayne, and the two became the Super Sons. After a journey through space with his time-displaced grandfather, John crash-landed on Earth 3 and was kept prisoner in a volcano for several years by the villain Ultraman. John eventually escaped and found his way home, where he discovered that what had been several years for him was only a few weeks on Earth. When his father left Earth to fight alien threats, John became the new Superman.